The Great Takeover and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, Christopher, and welcome everyone to Mark and the Millennials. We have a great program today called The Great Takeover and the dumbest bill in America, and it is really stupid. Proof of the Great Takeover itself. And I like to do that when we have a podcast, is to demonstrate to you through actual bills and actual policy changes that what we're saying is indeed happening and is indeed so. So first up, something kind of funny, but also proof of the Great Takeover. If you wanted a society that could be taken over completely by the government, where the people no longer have rights, and the people can't determine right from wrong and up from down and out from in, then what you would start to do is to teach people, number one, that boys can be girls and girls can be boys, but also that fat people and skinny people are exactly the same in terms of the way their body looks. In other words, if you looked at someone who is morbidly obese, that somehow that is a beautiful body, even if the individual has chosen to be that way through eating habits and so forth. I'm being very careful here, as you can tell. And someone who is intentionally trying to take care of themselves. They work out, or they walk a lot, or they really watch their diet. They try not to drink too much. They do, that is alcohol. They try to drink too much. They don't do drugs. In other words, they're really trying to take care of their bodies. And one of the things the government would do is to try to convince you that those who are obese, look just as good as those who are thin. Proof, ladies and gentlemen, proof be told. Well, get this. Snowflake activists have forced the cancellation of the group Queen's, remember Queen, Fat Bottom Girls. So the Queen has a song called Fat Bottom Girls. It's been around for decades, obviously. And here's what the article says. As so-called body positivity activists continue to push the obesity agenda, Universal Music Group has dropped one of the British classic rock band Queen's most popular songs, titled Fat Bottom Girls, from its latest Greatest Hits compilation, according to The Telegraph. The 1978 single, penned by Queen lead guitarist and part-time astrophysicist Brian May, is a rollicking celebration of thickness, with lyrics like, quote, "I was just a skinny lad, never knew no good from bad, but I knew life before I left my nursery, left alone with big fat Fanny. She was such a naughty nanny. Big woman, you made a bad boy out of me." So the label of the record company, the label decided that it was inappropriate and not suitable. And so they've decided to do what? They decided to, get rid of the song altogether, or at least to get rid of some of the lyrics. So, included in the Universal curated selection in the band's biggest hit to date, Bohemian Rhapsody, which critics interpret as being about Mercury's coming to grips with his terminal AIDS diagnosis, the song, the opening lines, "Mama just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead." Apparently, all these different songs, like all songs, ladies and gentlemen, have lyrics that people may find objective or not objective. We live in a free society. You're free not to listen to the song, okay? You're free to turn that radio station off. You're free, by the way, to not listen to the Spotify channel that has those songs. I mean, now you can actually curate the kind of songs that you want to listen to, right? With Spotify as an example. So you don't have to listen to the song. But of course, we know that we are in a process of a great takeover in the United States and across the planet in Western democracies, when the left tries to tell us that you can't criticize fat or you can't make fun of fat. In other words, you can't say, wow, that's fat. No, you're not supposed to say that. Instead, you're supposed to say, well, that is a really beautiful person over there who, looks just like everybody else. They're just as well-defined as every other person that is here today. It's nonsense, right? So we're going to play for you this song from Queen, give you a little feel for it. And here it is. Here's the clip.
You gotta take me home tonight. Oh, time to sign your red fire light. Oh, you gonna let it all hang out. Fat bottom girls, you make the rockin' world go round.
So there's this song. As you can tell, the song rocks it out, and it's a funny song. It's a great song to sing to, but apparently you can't do that anymore. On Twitter, Amri Seren said, maybe ban all songs as potentially demeaning to someone, except rap, of course. I mean, you hear the stuff they say on rap. Of course not. We're not going to cancel that. And then, quote, here's another one, another person on Twitter. I think it's the same person. I'm confused. So are we or are we not allowed to like fat bottom girls? But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the thing. We're being told by our government that if you're obese, that somehow that is supposed to be just as attractive as someone who's thin, as I've said before. And so part of the Great Takeover is to confuse people about what is and what isn't, and what is thin and what is fat. And to reverse the two. Oh, actually, fat is more attractive than thin. In whose book? Right? I mean, who? Who thinks that? And of course I feel bad for people who are morbidly obese. Of course I do. Okay? And I know that in some cases, there are serious health issues that have led to that. But in most cases, I think it's a choice. I really do. I think it's a health, a lifestyle issue. But we can't even talk about that anymore because of the Great Takeover. The Great Takeover would also do what? They would convince you as an adult that men can be women and women can be men. But now that's not enough for them. Now they want to convince your children that boys can be girls and girls can be boys. And they're trying to do it in places that are completely unexpected. So, ladies and gentlemen, listen to this. More photos have surfaced of the Walt Disney Company's theme parks having men in drag who are greeting little kids at the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique dress shop. So the theme park has made headlines in May over another mustached man in a dress greeting little girls at the boutique where they can get a princess makeover. The high-priced shop takes children through getting princess ready complete with their magic mirrors and a salon where they can get their hair and makeup done after selecting the perfect princess dress to wear as they visit the theme park. Makeovers at the boutique, are limited to ages 3 to 12. Listen to that! At the Bibbidi Bobbidi Boutique, this makeover boutique at the Disney theme park, Disney World, it's limited to kids ages 3 to 12. And the people greeting the kids as they walk in are men who are employed by Disney dressed as women. Obviously, this experience is geared towards girls who are ages 3 to 12. That's what it was always traditionally geared towards. It was targeting those age groups and that particular gender, young girls. So young girls who always wanted to be a princess, right? My daughter both daughters always wanted to be a princess. Take them to Disney World. They would absolutely want to become a princess and be made up like a princess and feel special and all that stuff. Oh, not anymore. Now you have men dressed as women who are Disney employees greeting the parents and the children. In previous years, little girls and their parents would be met at the door by one of the fairy godmothers in training, usually a young woman who would help them decide on their perfect princess makeover. Now, they appear to be being met by drag queens. They don't appear to be met, they are drag queens. There are pictures of them. By the way, go on Libs of TikTok, and you will see on Libs of TikTok on Twitter, or X as it's known these days, but I think it'll always be known as Twitter. And you will see pictures of the Libs of TikTok showing these pictures of these men dressed up. And you can't get in the doorway until you have the greeter greet you, because it's like the doorway isn't that big. And so this big drag queen is right in your way, you know. Fat bottom girls, this is fat bottom dudes. Fat bottom dudes all the way, with beards and mustaches, dressed in drag, greeting children who are supposed to be there to become a princess. On Friday, this is a few weeks ago, Libs of TikTok posted images of two separate men in dresses greeting children. In a video posted to Twitter at the end of May, a mustache man in heavy makeup is seen introducing himself to a child as one of the fairy godmother apprentices. So look, here's the thing. What kind of corporation thinks it's okay to target children? Who is telling this corporation to do this? Ladies and gentlemen, there's something that's happening in our society that is not, I don't believe, organic. I don't believe there is a groundswell for a large corporation like Walt Disney World to commit suicide by targeting the very children that's supposed to be entertaining, except entertaining them with drag queens? I mean, it's literally grooming. And that's really kind of what we're talking about here. We're calling this the wonderful world of Disney grooming, because that's what they are doing. And they're targeting children ages 3 to 12, which is what that experience is limited to. And to my point, this podcast being called The Great Takeover, there's no way a corporation would willingly want to commit suicide when it is a publicly traded corporation where stockholders have a say in the direction of the company, knowing that the company's stock is already not doing well, and this information is getting out there. And so a couple of things come to mind. Who in our government is telling these corporations to do this? Because I don't think they're willingly doing this. I know there are some out there that disagree. Oh, Disney's been doing this crazy stuff for years. Folks, this is so in-your-face crazy, and it's so in-your-face grooming of children, that there has to be someone in government directing this to try to confuse people that fat is skinny and skinny is fat, and men are women and women are men, and boys are girls and girls are boys. And that's part of the whole Great Takeover. Convince people that there are no truths. Convince them that there are no truths, that they're, consequently, it's just like George Orwell, right? There's no truth. There's no beginning of history. There's no end of history. Today is the new beginning of history, because you're not allowed to look back on history to see what societal norms are and what common sense is. And so part of the Great Takeover, of course, is to convince people of these crazy concepts. And if that weren't enough, listen to this. 14 U.S. cities initiate new globalist climate plan in partnership with George Soros and Bill and Hillary Clinton. 14 U.S. cities initiate a new globalist climate plan. Now you might say, well, Mark, you just went from trying to confuse people what is skinny and what is fat and what is boy and what is girl to the climate plan. Well, that's part of what all this is about, ladies and gentlemen. So that way you no longer question anything. If you're confused about what is normal, what is common sense, what is genetics, then you can also be confused about the takeover of the government by using a climate emergency. The C4 Cities Climate Leadership Group is a globalist enterprise with at least 14 partners right here in the United States, as they have set an ambitious target to convince the masses to give up meat, dairy, and private car ownership, as well as almost all flights, to supposedly save the planet and control temperatures forever around the current level. Now think about this, folks. These are partner cities in the United States. They are trying to convince you, the American people, to not leave your house unless you walk. Oh, by the way, don't eat meat. Don't eat dairy. Eat bugs. Don't own a car. Don't travel at all. This is the Great Takeover in real time. And who is pushing this nonsense? Well, obviously it's George Soros and the Clintons. And do you think these very evil people, and I will say that now, these are evil people, to even suggest that you should shelter in place based on the climate while they get to travel to all the wonderful destinations across the world, the best beaches, the best hotels? They're not going to be living by these rules. And first of all, who do they think they are making these rules to begin with? It's a free society. 14 major American cities are part of a globalist climate organization known as the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group, which has an ambitious target by the year 2030 of 0 kilograms of meat consumption, 0 kilograms of dairy consumption, 3 new clothing items per person per year, 0 private vehicles owned, and 1 short-haul return flight, less than 1,500 kilometers every 3 years per person. The organization is headed and largely funded by Democrat billionaire Michael Bloomberg. Nearly 100 cities across the world make up the organization, and its American members include Austin, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, Miami, New Orleans, New York City, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Portland, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Seattle. So 14 leftist cities in the United States have signed on to this commitment to take away freedom of choice from their citizens while people suffer under rampant crime and children performing poorly in schools. But their priorities, of course, are to take away milk, meat, and gas-powered cars. Got it? Major funders and partners of the organization include, of course, George Soros's Open Society Foundations, the Clinton Foundation, and the World Bank. Now, I thought that we funded the World Bank in large part. So why don't we stop funding the World Bank? Also, how is George Soros allowed to get away with funding all of these anti-democratic initiatives? I mean, everything he does is about funding organizations that seek to take away human freedom and human choice. I mean, why isn't this guy in prison? This is what I don't understand. Oh, no, let's put all the other politicians that disagree with him in prison. But, let's put the American people who protest in prison. But let's not charge anyone who rioted, of course, during the 2020 elections, BLM and Antifa. And let's make sure that you actually shelter in place and don't eat food that they haven't approved of. What's interesting is, ladies and gentlemen, is I have a niece and a nephew and my nephew's spouse who are millennials, and they swore off meat. Swore off. No meat whatsoever. No red meat I'm talking about. And they decided that they were not going to eat red meat whatsoever, ever again. And they did this about 10 years ago. And then, and they looked at everyone who ate red meat as being, oh my God, you're from the Stone Age. Then they swore off poultry. No chicken, no turkey. Then they became, what's it called? Is it a pescatarian? Or I don't even know what the hell that is. But
pescatarian's just fish.
Yeah. So then they did just fish. Okay. That's all they would eat. And of course, veggies, and fruits and so forth. And then miraculously, I just saw them about 2 months ago. And I noticed they were eating red meat. And I looked at them and I said, what gives? And they said, well, now that we've had children, because one of them was pregnant but almost ready to give birth, like any day, and one had given birth like a year ago. Yeah, ever since the whole kid thing, being pregnant and then having the child and all that stuff, I actually crave red meat, and I've realized that I need red meat. I really do. In order to survive, in order to live a healthy lifestyle, I do need that. So now you have George Soros and the Clintons saying, you don't get to eat red meat. You don't get to have dairy. They want you to eat bugs. They want to end farming as we know it. Michael Bloomberg, the president of this particular group that is promoting this extremist anti-democrat agenda, anti-free society agenda, is himself transported via gas-guzzling private jets and limousines, naturally, to his many mansions around the world. Of course, this will not apply to him because he is a thought leader. And of course, we all know that George Soros and George Soros's crazy son, who's equally nutty as George Soros, are doing the exact same thing. And proof be told, ladies and gentlemen, that this is real. John Kerry decided to trash the entire farming community throughout the globe. Now remember, the United States of America is the world's breadbasket. We can produce more food than everyone else in the rest of the world. In fact, if we really put our minds to it, we can use the latest and greatest technology to produce food more efficiently and cleaner and better, and you can eat the food that you really want to eat. But that's just it, ladies and gentlemen. The only way they can get you to eat what they want you to eat, bugs, the only way these climate extremists can get you to eat what they want you to eat is to shut down farming. And they know that. They can't force a bug into your mouth. They're trying to. They realize that's not going to happen on a large scale, so they need to shut down farming itself. And to prove my point, John Kerry gave remarks recently which resurfaced concerning the Biden administration's draconian climate policies. At the AIM for Climate Summit in Washington, D.C., Kerry asserted, quote, "We can't get to net zero. We don't get this job done unless agriculture is front and center as part of the solution." We had that clip, ladies and gentlemen, and here it is.
Agriculture contributes about 33% of all the emissions of the world, depending a little bit on how you count it, but it's anywhere from 26 to 33. And we can't get to net zero. We don't get this job done unless agriculture is front and center as part of the solution.
Net zero what? We can't get to net zero. Net zero what? You ever notice they never give the details? It's just a religious cult to scare the living heck out of you and the people that aren't capable of thinking for themselves. So they're like, oh my God, we're all going to die. Let's give them more power. Jeez, how has that worked throughout history? Let's give the government more power because they're telling us we're going to die unless we give them all the power that they need. And so it's not, we need to get to zero, John Kerry says. No, we need to get to net zero. What they want is less than zero. What does that mean, though? Is he talking about like when you have a tractor plowing a field? Are those the emissions from the tractor that he's talking about? Or a harvesting machine or any of the other farming equipment that's required to farm on a massive scale? Is he talking about the emissions from those? Because my understanding is that John Deere is producing some of the most advanced battery-operated tractors and harvesters on the planet. I thought that that was going to solve the problem, but apparently not. You see, when industry comes in and tries to solve a problem that has been defined by the climate religious cult in our government, then they always show themselves like John Kerry. They're showing themselves because what they really want is to shut down farming altogether so that they can create a scarcity of food and say, well, there's only one thing left for you to eat: bugs. That's all there is. You know, you gotta eat bugs. No more chicken, no more turkey, no more meat, no more beef, no more pork, just bugs. And that's all the protein you're going to need because we're not going to farm anything else. And so this video, which reemerged and ignited by the Twitter profile Wide Awake Media, has prompted several prominent figures within the Republican Party to respond to Kerry's views. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, quickly condemned the remarks, stating, "Nothing to see here, just hypocritical Dems wanting to bankrupt every farmer in America." Similarly, Representative Andy Harris, Republican of Maryland, expressed his disbelief in how the now viral video calling Kerry's claim that farming and agriculture are responsible for carbon emissions ridiculous. Now, Representative Andy Harris represents an area on the eastern shore of Maryland of many, many farms. It's a large farming area, and they produce some of the most wonderful fruits and vegetables you can possibly imagine. If you've ever had Silver Queen corn, it's delicious. Their tomatoes, delicious. Melons that are grown there, incredibly sweet, just like the perfect growing conditions. Representative Mary Miller claimed in and took a fired-up stance, accusing Kerry of launching a war on farming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what they want to do, right? So this so-called Great Takeover by our government is about telling you that fat can be skinny, skinny can be fat, boy can be girl, girl can be boy, man can be woman, woman can be men, and therefore compete in women's sports. Men can compete in women's sports because they're really women, they're not men. They're grooming children. The Soros organization and the Clintons and Bloomberg are funding initiatives by cities to convince you to shelter in place because of a climate emergency and to only eat what they tell you to eat and to not travel and to get rid of your car. And now we have John Kerry saying that farmers are bad, that they're evil, that they're the problem, that they're the big polluters. The very people that are feeding us are the bad people? Really, John Kerry? This is how you know that our government has been taken over, ladies and gentlemen, and they are trying to engage in the greatest takeover in human history of the greatest republic and the greatest economic force in human history, the United States of America. And they know that the only way they can do that is to create a religious cult called the Climate Takeover. And this religious cult, they're able to convince a good amount of people, by the way, that we're all going to die because of the climate change, but they can't actually tell you specifics and details as to step by step what has to be done in order to make incremental changes, because they don't want to. They just want control. They want you to stay home while they get to travel to the best resorts on the planet, and they want you to just become a subject. They're the kings, they're the emperors, and you're just a subject. If you think that isn't enough, get this, ladies and gentlemen. Get this. Cameras. This is coming to the United States soon, I am convinced. Not that we don't have plenty of cameras around already. Cameras go up to punish drivers in the name of climate change. Then the vigilantes strike. So this is in the Western Journal. A major city has instituted draconian law to satisfy the climate change religion backed up by a mass surveillance camera network, resulting in de facto tax costing residents hundreds. And authorities are shocked that citizens are taking matters into their own hands by vandalizing the cameras. Get this. Citizens of London are furious over the city's ultra-low emission zone, otherwise known as ULEZ or ULEZ, ultra-low emission zone, rules that render a large section of the city of London practically inaccessible by car because there are very few vehicles that meet the draconian emission standards that permit them to enter the zone, according to the Drive magazine. London city officials have designated 147 square miles as a sector that is pollution-free and an ultra-low emission zone, supposedly to clean up the air quality in the city. The idea is to discourage citizens from driving in the zone by charging them fines for driving the wrong kind of auto into the area. Oh, so now there are right kinds of vehicles and wrong kinds of vehicles. Officials hope, sounds like electric cars versus combustible engine cars in the United States, doesn't it? Officials hope that citizens will get the message and buy vehicles that have higher emission standards and stop using their older vehicles. Well, again, this is a similar step in London to really force people to not have vehicles at all, because the rules keep changing, right? They keep changing. To achieve this objective in London, officials have set up a massive network of hundreds of cameras that monitor the streets and take photos of every car on the road. The photo is then compared to vehicle registrations, which tell the computer system whether the license plate is on a car that meets the standards. If the car does not meet the standards, the owner is sent a $15.88 fine per day. $15.88. And that fine is every day. And if the fines are not paid, they will be charged an additional $288.71 on top of the fines that are missed. Even worse, the ULEZ zones have no grandfather clause for people who live and work in the area and no immunity for them for the ULEZ rules. So in other words, if you already work in the area but you have a car that doesn't meet the zone requirements, you're not grandfathered in. Sorry, too bad. We really don't want you to have a car to begin with. And what I always find fascinating is that people in the United States don't think this stuff is going to come here. I mean, this is in London, right? British people are free-thinking people. They're critical thinkers. And their government is engaging in the same great takeover as our government. And we know why, because the Soros organization and the Clintons and the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and all these other globalists want to get rid of individual freedom. They want to end human freedom as we know it, ladies and gentlemen. They know that's what they have to do. They know it. And the only way they can get to that point where they get rid of human freedom and they have monarchs in control or emperors in control and they have an extreme surveillance state in control, the only way they can get there is if they convince enough people in these countries that we are in a climate emergency and that it is a religion that must be believed. And if you don't believe in the religion, you are a denier. And therefore, you will be dealt with. And that is the Great Takeover. It's happening in real time in the United States. And I can only hope and pray that the people that are in the cities where the Soroses and the Clintons and the Bloombergs are trying to convince the people in those cities that they don't have individual rights of freedom of movement, that they will rebel. And I want them to rebel peacefully and protest peacefully, of course. But believe me when I say this, if our government doesn't get this message, and if we don't give our government this message during this election that's coming up, we may very well lose this country. And we, the people, must tell our government that they cannot take away our freedoms anymore. They did it during COVID, during the lockdowns, and they're trying to do the exact same thing again. That is to say, they're trying to lock down society again, but this time with a climate emergency, and that is exactly what the Great Takeover is. And so we will have an opportunity to discuss this more in future podcasts, including interviews with people who know a lot about these particular subjects and what these individuals, Soros and Bloomberg and Clintons, are really trying to get to. And what is motivating them, other than, of course, absolute power. And we'll have an opportunity to do that in the future. But next up, ladies and gentlemen, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is hiring illegals as police officers. You heard that correctly, ladies and gentlemen. The dumbest bill in America is hiring illegals to be police officers. Now, as you've probably heard during this podcast, The Great Takeover, we're telling you the government's trying to do everything it can to confuse you about what is right and what is wrong. And here's another example. Open up the borders, get rid of countries as we know it. And the most powerful country to get rid of would be the United States of America. Create a situation where citizenship becomes useless and meaningless, and then overwhelm the country with illegals, people who have broken our laws because they've crossed into the country illegally, and then hire them as police officers. They're enforcing the law, the same people that broke it. So get this. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, a Democrat, signed a bill into law that would allow non-U.S. citizens to become police officers. Opponents of the bill argue that it will be madness to allow foreign nationals to arrest American citizens. After passing the Illinois State House and the Senate, Pritzker, the governor, signed the law known as Illinois House Bill 3751. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there was a great debate on the House floor. I think it was on the Senate floor in Illinois. And I want to premise this by saying it's just kind of obvious what the debate would be. And here's Republican State Senator Rose of Illinois, the state senator, on the Senate floor talking about this insanity. We have a clip, and here it is.
We listen every day in this building to debates about the police powers of the state of Illinois. And yet here we are conferring the police power, the ability to arrest a citizen of the state of Illinois, or frankly, a visitor to Illinois from anywhere else in the United States of America, an American citizen, to a non-citizen.
Imagine that. Illegals given the responsibility to arrest American citizens who are illegal. House Bill 3751 states as follows, quote, provides that an individual who is not a citizen but is legally authorized to work in the United States under federal law is authorized to apply for the position of police officer, subject to all requirements and limitations other than citizenship, to which other applicants are subject. So in other words, citizenship doesn't matter. This is the Great Takeover. This is the Great Takeover. And the only way to correct this craziness, ladies and gentlemen, other than to elect people that have common sense and believe in our country and believe in citizenship and believe that borders matter, the only way to correct this is to either elect people to overturn this law. I mean, I'm sure the law is going to be taken to court, of course, but that misses the point, or just leave the state of Illinois. I'm sorry. If 10 million people left the state of Illinois now, so be it. So be it. Who cares? It's the only way to teach these crazy blue states a lesson. I mean, that's all that's left. I mean, Chicago is the dog wagging its tail on the rest of the state. The rest of the state is red, of course, in Illinois, but Chicago is super blue. Chicago runs the state. And as a consequence, the state is controlled by crazy Democrats. Now, obviously, I feel very bad for people who don't have the ability to move out of Chicago or move out of Illinois because they're too poor. I do. I feel terrible for those people because many of those people do know better. They do know what they want. They do want a safe community. They do believe in American citizenship. They do love their country. They do believe in borders. But the only way for this to correct itself, I think, really at this point, is for there to be a mass exodus from the state of Illinois. According to WTVO, Illinois would allow any immigrant with legal authorization to work or who remains in the country under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA Act, to apply for the position. That's not really what it sounds like to me. Because the previous description in the bill, which I read verbatim from House Bill 3751, says anybody can be a police officer. And as long as they meet all the qualifications, other than the citizenship part, because they don't have to meet that one anymore, then they get hired. They get hired. And I personally think, ladies and gentlemen, that one of the reasons Illinois, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons they're so desperate for police officers is because they went through this massive cancel the police movement, disrespecting police officers in Chicago, which caused a massive amount of people who are police officers to retire early or just leave the profession altogether. And now you have lots of people who have left Illinois already and continue wanting to leave Illinois. And they're like, well, let's just hire illegals. Since we're a sanctuary city, why don't we have a sanctuary police force? Oh my gosh. So get this. Quote, at 5 p.m. yesterday, when no one was paying attention, Pritzker signed a bill to allow illegal immigrants to become police officers, giving non-citizens the power to arrest citizens in our state. Miller wrote, and this is Representative Mary Miller of Illinois, she's a Republican, wrote on Twitter, no sane state would allow foreign nationals to arrest their citizens. This is madness. Ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this. I believe that this great takeover that's occurring, that is the great takeover of the very, very wealthy oligarchs in the United States, like, I don't know, Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, George Soros, and then the powerful elite, the Clintons, the Obamas, combined with big tech, Google, YouTube, and others, combined with, of course, the dishonest mainstream media, and then combined with the deep state, are all colluding together to do a complete great takeover of the United States of America, which involves turning all of us into subjects where we are no longer free, but instead we are subjects of the elite and the oligarchs and the deep state, etc. And that is the dumbest bill in America, hiring illegals as police officers. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Getter, True Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.